Welcome everyone to Fruits of the Orchard. Today we are beginning a new book, the last book of the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, the book of Deuteronomy, Devarim. And we'll start with Parshat Devarim. It has the same name. And in this Parsha, there is a lot of review from Moshe about everything that's happened until we're now 40 years after being in the desert. The book of Devarim all happens in 37 days. It says specifically that Moshe began to give it over on the first of the month of Shvat. And by tradition, Moshe passes away on Zayin Adar. So the whole book of Deuteronomy takes place in 37 days. And in this book, Moshe reviews many of the mitzvot, reveals new mitzvot from Hashem, and there's a lot of review of everything that the Jewish people had gone through up to that point, and in the end, many prophecies of what would happen in the future. So as part of his review, the following, for those who have Fruits of the Orchard, we're on page 477, and we will be doing the article called the Primordial Torah. So Moshe says like this: so I, meaning Moses, sent messengers from the desert of Kedemot to Sichon, king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, allow me to pass through your land. I will go along by the highway. I will turn neither to the right nor to the left. So here we see Moshe is requesting from Sichon, let us pass through your land. We'll take the main highway. Later he says we won't drink anything, and if we would drink, we would pay for it. We just want to pass through your land to get to Eretz Yisrael. Sichon refuses and goes to war with Israel. So we're going to really be concentrating on one Rashi and the implications of it. So Rashi, first of all, says this name, the desert of Kedemot, doesn't appear anyplace else. So the question is, where was this? Is it another place, but now it's being called this? So Rashi says like this. He says, and there are a number of questions. In other words, it doesn't say that God commanded Moshe to propose peace to Sichon. So Rashi says like this: even though God did not command me to offer peace to Sichon, I learned this from the desert of Sinai, from the primordial Torah of the world that is eternal. So what did Moshe learn? What did he learn from the midbar of Sinai? So he says that when Hashem came to give the Torah to Israel, before so, he offered it to Esav and Yishmael. And they refused it, but Rashi says it was clear to God that they wouldn't accept the Torah. Nevertheless, he offered it to them as like offering peace, offering them this gift, even though he knew that they wouldn't accept it. So Moshe says, even though God didn't command me, I learned from God's actions at the giving of the Torah at Sinai. So that explains on one level why it's called Midbar Kedemot. Kedemot comes from the word Kedem, before. But in Rashi, he says what I learned from the mountain of Sinai. So in the tractate of Shabbat on 89a, it says actually that the desert surrounding Sinai had 5 different names. And one of them was the Midbar of Kedemot. Why? Because on it, God gave the primordial Torah. Now, the primordial Torah means a Torah that preceded the world. So this opens up, because Rashi, in a sense, he could have just said this thing that Moshe learned from before Kedem, before what God did. So he learned from that and he offered peace to Sichon. But Rashi adds this idea that God offered and gave to Israel a Torah Keduma, a primordial Torah that existed before the world. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at different traditions, different sources for this idea that the Torah preceded the world. It's not just a compilation of what happened from the time of Adam. Even before that, we could say from Bereshit, from Genesis, it records the creative process of God in creating the world. But here the claim is that the Torah comes even before the world. So I'm now going to read to you a fascinating discussion in the Talmud. And it goes like this. This is in the Tractate of Shabbat, page 88b. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, when Moses ascended on high to receive the Torah, the ministering angels said before the Holy One, blessed be he, Master of the universe, what is one born of a woman doing here among us? Here in heaven, Moshe goes up to heaven where the angels are, or you could say physically, or Moshe's consciousness raised to such a place that he was in a heavenly abode. And the angels are, what is a human being doing here among us? The Holy One, blessed he, said to them, he came to receive the Torah. The angels said before him, the Torah is a hidden treasure that was concealed by you 974 generations before the creation of the world. And you seek it to give it to flesh and blood? They're like incredulous. Why is God giving this primordial Torah that existed 974 generations before the creation of the world to human beings? And they quote a verse, as it is said, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations. So this is a verse that this Torah was commanded to 1,000 generations. Now it turns out that Moshe and Israel is the 26th generation from Adam. So if you take 26 from 1,000, you have 974. That's where the number 974 comes from, because from the creation, there were 26 generations, and now human beings are going to get the Torah. But the angels are claiming before that, before creation, the Torah existed for 974 generations. They continue with another quote. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you think of him? Rather, God, our God, how glorious is your name in all of the earth, that your majesty is placed above the heavens. So the angels are claiming, your place is above the heavens. The Torah is meant to be in the heavens. And they conclude the rightful place of God's majesty, the Torah, is in the heavens. So this, of course, is a fascinating midrash, Agarata. But now we're going to add other sources to this. And that is, so it says also in the Talmud that 7 things were created before the world. For anyone who wants to check this out, this is in Tractate Pesachim 54a. So what are the 7 things created before the world? The first on the list is the Torah. So the list is Torah was created before the world, Tshuva, Gan Eden, Gehenna, Kisei HaKavod, God's throne of glory, the temple that would eventually be in Jerusalem, the name of Mashiach, and the name of Mashiach. So these are the 7 things created before the world. Again, we're bringing sources now to establish this idea that there is such a thing as a primordial Torah that comes before the world. Another one in the Zohar is a very well-known one, that God looked into the Torah and created the world. So this is the idea brought in many, many places, the idea of the Torah as a primordial blueprint upon which the Torah is, actually the world is created. And this goes along with our idea that the letters in the Sfirot are the building blocks of creation. Well, the Torah is made up of Hebrew letters. So God looks into the Torah and creates the world. Now, there's a question that everyone asks, and that is, if the Torah is primordial and God looked into the Torah, are you meaning that everything that we have in the Torah now preceded the world? And if so, it would preclude free will, because it would mean that everything was determined, everything that Avram did and Yitzhak did and Yaakov and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and everyone in the Torah, that it was pre-scripted. But that's not how we understand it. That when it says that God looked into the Torah and created the world, we can understand it in 2 ways. One, that it's talking about specifically, and this is how I learned it, the 7 days of creation. That was the blueprint, the way that God created the world and maintains the world and continues to create. That is engraved in the letters of the 7 days of creation. How everything else in the Torah manifests itself, that is as events played themselves out. And that's why in a number of places in Rashi, we see that God commanded Moshe to write the Torah up to that point, or to write a certain section of the Torah after certain events. So we can't really say that the exact Torah we have now is pre-scripted, because then there would be no free will. But as we'll learn later, we could say that the archetypal energies and models behind the stories, those did pre-exist. And then we have the idea that God created the world and that the Torah is black fire on white fire. So this is usually meant to express the idea that the letters of the Torah, the letters that are written on the parchment, on the cloth, the letters are the black fire, and the parchment is the white fire. So this is a very mystical idea. And we're told that there are many, many, many different levels to understanding the black fire. That's how we have the idea of pardes, pshat, remez, drush, and so the literal meaning, the alluded to, hinted to meanings, the allegorical, metaphorical, parable, symbolic meanings of the Torah, and then the mystical, spiritual explanations of the Torah, pardes. Then we have the idea of 70 faces to the Torah, that each verse, each story, each mitzvah has 70 different perspectives, 70 different dimensions. The Arizal said 600,000 dimensions, one for every letter and one for every root Jewish soul. So the Torah is understood on multiple levels, multiple dimensions. So that's the black fire. But the white fire, we're told we don't have any concept really of what is this white fire. We're told that in the Messianic era, even the secrets of the white fire will be revealed to us. Now, before going back, I want to mention another important source in the book of Proverbs, where there's a whole section of the book of Proverbs where in parable form, the Torah is speaking. The Torah is the narrator of that part. And here, the Torah says that God made me the beginning of his ways. And so the reason that this verse is so important, first, just a simple meaning is, again, the Torah is saying, I was the first of his, even before creation, I was the first of his expression, the expression of his will. Now, why this verse is important? Because Rashi, on the first word of the Torah, Bereshit, says, don't read it or don't translate it Bereshit, meaning in the beginning, Be as meaning in, but read it Bishvil, for the sake of Torah that is called beginning. And he brings two verses, and this is one of them. He brings that for the sake of the Torah that is called the first of his ways, God created the world. And the second verse is Bishvil Yisrael, for Israel, which is called the first of his produce. So here again, we have an idea of the Torah preceding the world. That's why it's called Torah Kedumah. It came from before. So now going back to this idea of the black fire and the white fire. So now we want to use that to explain the first Rashi that we started with, where Moshe sent from the desert of Kedemot peace offerings to Sichon, asking him to go through his land. And as Rashi said, that Moshe learned this from God's actions by offering the Torah to Esav and Yishmael, even though he knew that they wouldn't accept it. So first of all, we could learn something simple but very important from this Rashi. And many of us go through this in different relationships, different circumstances, where we know something is not going to succeed, but we go through the motions anyways because it's important to make the attempt. This happens between people many times, is that you want to tell someone something, you want to warn them, you want to make peace with them. But for whatever the circumstance, you know you're not going to be successful, but you do it anyways because, like we'll say, I want to be on record that I tried to make peace. Because if I'm not on record, it could be interpreted that I never tried. I do want to try. Deep down inside, I don't believe I'll be successful, but I'm gonna try anyways. That's what's implied here. That God knew that Esav and Yishmael would not receive the Torah. Moshe knew that Sichon wouldn't accept it either. But they wanted it official that they tried. So we can apply this to the black fire and white fire. The black fire represents God's will manifest in the black letters in the Torah. But what is this white fire? So to understand this, the teachings of the Arizal, the greatest of the great, he was the one who gave us this whole Kabbalistic cosmology of how God created the world through contraction and how the worlds came into being and the Sphirot and the role of the letters. But what's interesting in the teachings of the Arizal, as revealed by Rabbi Chaim Vital, there's no talk, there's no discussion of anything that happened before creation. In other words, trying to understand the essence of God pre-creation. It's not like the Ari didn't know or understand, but for whatever reason, he felt right now it's not appropriate, or Rabbi Chaim Vital decided not to put any of the Ari's teachings in written form about these pre-creation levels. But some of the other students or students of the Ari did give forward proposals or ideas or deep revelations of trying to understand the essence of God that, in a sense, would make God want to create the world. As it were, what was going on in God's mind to make the switch from this infinite perfection, light of God, to creating a physical, material, finite, and in our experience, somewhat flawed, blemished, broken world. Not a simple question. But one of them was Rabbi Naftali Hertz in one second. I apologize. The name of the book just escaped me. I do know it, but for the moment it escaped me. Emek HaMelech, excuse me, a very, very important book called Emek HaMelech. And in it, he does discuss pre-creation essence levels of God. And one of them relates to the white fire, where he said that before creation, God contemplated and measured all possibilities of created reality. Now, in modern science, they talk about parallel universes, multiple universes. And the idea is that when we make choices, well, there are a lot of possibilities of what we can choose. Let's say we choose A. But B, C, D, and E, there is a reality to it that might actually manifest itself in future times. An example like this is the sages chose to follow the way of Hillel in interpreting the law and not the way of Shammai. Nonetheless, all of the opinions of Shammai and all other cases where you have 4, 5, 6, 7 opinions, and then one of them becomes the normative halacha, but all of the other opinions are maintained for all of history, and we learn them because there are points of truth. There is logic. There are sources that back these different ideas. Now, that's not the one that was chosen, but there's a reality to the other choices, to the point that we're told after Mashiach comes, we will now decide the law like Shammai. Well, this is like a huge revolution here, that for thousands of years we've been going according to Hillel, and now we're told we're going to go by Shammai because the world will change, circumstances will change, consciousness will change, and we may understand the halacha more towards Shammai. So this is the idea that Naftali Hertz was saying, that God contemplated all the different possibilities of every atom, every electron, every human choice that could or would ever happen. And that's like the white fire. So I'm explaining all of this because when God offered the Torah to Esav and Yishmael, and it says, and he knew that they wouldn't accept it. But that's in the black fire, and that's how it happened. That's how it's recorded. But in the white fire, there's always this possibility that Esav and Yishmael will accept the Torah. And in fact, we're told that after Mashiach comes, the whole world will, in one way or another, accept the sovereignty of God, the truth of Torah, and there will be unity and love and harmony in the world. So in the white fire, there is a place where Esav and Yishmael will receive the Torah. And this is true of everything. And this is such a deep understanding of what Torah is in general, and especially this primordial Torah. So now let's go back to the first story we told about the angels wondering, what is a human being doing up in heaven? And God says, I'm giving him the Torah, and they couldn't believe it. Why would you give a primordial heavenly Torah to human beings? Now that story continues, and God says to Moshe, you tell him why. You tell him why I'm giving you this Torah. And so Moshe gives a number of examples by reading different verses from the Torah that all had to do with a material, physical world. And he's explaining to the angels, you're not living on a physical, material plane. So this Torah is for us. It's talking about our level. Kabbalistically, the world of Asiyah. So, okay, that's a great answer, Moshe. But we'll go back to the angels, what's called Havamina. What were they thinking? They didn't know what was written in the Torah that Moshe was going to receive. What didn't they understand? What was the Torah that they thought needed to be in heaven and was there for 974 generations already? So this idea actually everything we're talking about are very, very deep, profound concepts of trying to understand what the Torah is and how it manifests in different levels of reality. So now I want to bring a number of different ideas about what the angels, their claim. What is this primordial Torah, and what does it have to do with the Torah that we have now? So first of all, there is this idea in Kabbalah that in each of the Kabbalistic worlds, the Torah manifests itself in different ways. The Torah that we have is the Torah of the world of Asiyah. But the Torah of the world of Yitzirah, or Bria, or Atzilut, because those worlds contain levels of consciousness far above normative consciousness in Olam Asiyah, the Torah is manifest in a different way. They're reading it in a different way. They're understanding it in a different way. So the idea is, well, how does this work? So the Chatam Sofer says outright, he says the Torah Kedumah is a spiritual Torah. And so let's say when we learn the Torah according to Pardes, Pshat, Remez, Drush, and Sod. So let's say it's the Zohar, and the Zohar is discussing a story or a verse in the Torah. Well, it's reading it as svirot and names of God and letter combinations are happening in these verses and these stories where they're reading it on a completely different level. It doesn't nullify the what's called the simple meaning, but because their consciousness on such a higher level, they can understand that the same verse, the same mitzvah, is operating on both a physical level, but a spiritual level. And this is the discussion in the Gemara that states that Avram and all the other patriarchs and matriarchs kept the Torah before it was given. So there's discussion. Does that mean every detail, the way that we have Torah now? So I learned from Rav Ginsburg that there is a possibility in some cases that's true. He said, but we don't understand it literally. We understand it that they could perceive the archetypal, spiritual, mystical meanings of everything, and they could see prophetically how these concepts would eventually be revealed as physical mitzvot to be done through speech and action. But they weren't necessarily keeping Shabbat the way we keep Shabbat. But we have a tradition, they were keeping Shabbat, but on a very spiritual level. So that's what the Chatam Sofer is saying, that the primordial Torah is all spiritual. And that's what the angels, because that's the Torah they were used to. They didn't understand how the Torah can be distilled, can be brought down and enclosed really in the black fire of the Torah, in the black letters of the Torah, in concrete people and mitzvot and actions. The Ramban, in his introduction to his very, very important commentary on the Chumash, says that the whole Torah is a string of names of God. And people like the Arizal, the Rashash, so when they look at a verse in the Torah, they can understand it as names of God. And so at a higher level, the whole Torah can be understood as names of God. And that, again, the idea of the Zohar and the Kabbalah and Hasidut is to bring these ideas down so we can have a semblance of understanding of these higher levels. Then there's the idea of permutations. We know that every word can be permuted. The letters can be permuted in different orders. And so therefore you can read words, explanations of mitzvot, stories by whole different levels of understanding. And then we have mystical alphabets, where, for example, Atbash, where you take the first letter, an Aleph, and the last letter, a Tav, and you exchange them. You take the second letter, a Bet, and the second last letter, a Shin, and you exchange them. So you have a different alphabet, and you can read the Torah with a different alphabet. And there happen to be a number of mystical alphabets. The Baal Leshem, another very, very famous Kabbalist, so he said that the Torah that we have is a Torah of exile. So much of the book is about going down to Egypt, the brothers selling Yosef, being slaves in Egypt, coming out of Egypt, wandering in the desert for 40 years. It's a Torah of exile. And that the Torah of redemption will understand on a completely different level. And that's why it says in Vayikra Rabbah, it says, Torah chadasha mi'iti tetzeh. This is God speaking. A new Torah will come out from me. Now, there's much discussion. What does that mean? Because the Rambam, in his 13 principles of faith, says that we have perfect faith that the Torah that we have now will never be changed, even after Mashiach comes. So Rav Ginsburg and others explain that the Torah itself will not change, but our understanding of the Torah will be new, will be radically different, because our consciousness will be so expanded that the very words that we're reading now and interpreting them in a certain way, we will have eyes to see and a heart to know and a mind to know such higher levels. So now I bring a teaching from the Maggid of Mezrich, where he was talking about the 4 different Kabbalistic worlds. And he said, Atzilut, which is the highest of the levels, where we're told that it's so exalted that there's no difference between light and vessel. Is the unity of Atzilut is a perfect unity. It's only after Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil that there was a fall of the worlds, and then only then was Bria and Yetzira and Asiyah, the 3 lower worlds, revealed to our world, which is the most concrete and material of all of them. But the Maggid said, Atzilut is here. And what he meant is, even though on one level of reality, we look at the 4 Kabbalistic worlds as being a hierarchy, a ladder. And we're down here, And as you go up, each world becomes more spiritual and less material. And you keep on going up until you get to purely spiritual worlds where it's absolute unity. But he said, Atzilut is here, meaning that it's a holistic vision of reality, that all the different dimensions of both physical and spiritual reality, they're all here, and they can all be accessed through consciousness. And in fact, Rav Ginsburg teaches that these worlds are really symbolic of levels of consciousness that we understand ourselves and the world we live in and God. So having said that, we can now go back to many of these different ideas about what is the Torah, and what level is the Torah, how do we understand the Torah? And we could say the same thing. The primordial Torah is here. It's not just something that existed 974 generations before creation. And it's not just something Torah Chadasha Mi'iti Teitzei, that in the future, a new understanding of the Torah will be revealed. It's all here. And this is what's called living in divine time. Because for God, past, present, and future are all happening simultaneously. Hu haya, hu hoveh, v'hu yiyeh b'tifara. He was, he is, and he will be. But we could read that as a chronological progression, or we can understand he was, he is, and he will be all here now at the same time. This is what's called experiencing divine time. And many of us have had experiences where at some peak moment, some epiphany happens, and it happens in like a minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds. But for however long it is, we're beyond the strictures of bound time, that we're experiencing an eternal, infinite moment. And that's always available. And obviously, the higher the consciousness, the more we're able to access these levels. So as I said before, there's much to contemplate here. There's much to understand. But bottom line is the Torah is really infinite, black fire and white fire. It's infinite. And the Torah that we have is the stepping stone, is the gate. And we need every letter of the Torah. We know that if even one letter is missing in the Torah, it becomes invalid. So we use the letters of the Torah, the building blocks of creation. God looked into the Torah and created the world, that each letter contains like an atomic explosion of meaning and possibility. And I want to end with a blessing that we're able to take the Torah Keduma, the primordial Torah, and through learning Torah, the Torah that we have, which is so precious and gives us such a sense of purpose in this world, and is the means through which we can fulfill the greatest potential of our souls, the Jewish people can fulfill their mission to be a light unto the nations. And through the Torah, we can learn to become close to the Creator. And through all of that, we begin to draw into our reality a Torah chadasha me'iti tetzeh, a new Torah, new levels of understanding that we can't even contemplate now. It's not really in our possibility, but we get little hints, little illusions. The more that we grab them and make them part of our lives, then the more we can draw redemptive energy into the world, and we should see a world of peace and harmony.